Hello, this is Faris Anderson, and this is my PowerPoint presentation on my cultural immersion project, research, events, and interview. And my cultural group is the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy. Now, let's see what are the intergroup and intragroup characteristics of the U.S. military. Well, what is intergroup? So intergroup refers to the relationship with other groups, right? While intragroup refers to the relationship within the group, right? Relationships within the group itself, in this case, the military. And the military has a distinct identity from civilian society, which includes uniforms, jargon, or a specific language, and discipline, right? Now, what are civilians? Well, civilians are us, right? People who are not in uniform, right? And the military is they're not civilians, right? They are the armed forces. So let's be clear. Now, the military has a very rigid hierarchy, which fosters cohesion, but also limits communication, right? And the intragroup diversity, right, includes rank, role, branch, gender, and tenure, right? There are marginalized groups within the military which face unique barriers to equity and leadership, which include women and minorities, people of color, right? These populations have struggles, not only in the US, but also in the military, as we know. So the military is not exempt from marginalized populations. Now, what are some of the common attitudes, beliefs, and values within the US military? And the internalized values, right, are duty, honor, loyalty, and courage. Military people are very resilient and they are very connected to their duty of service and honor, right? And the military favors collectivism over individualism, which means that the collective, the entity itself, the group, is more important than the individual. So they act as a team, right? And it fosters discipline, but it discourages help seeking, right? Because then if I am seeking or looking for help, then I am vulnerable and I am weak. And the military has this image of being strong and resilient, right? And mental health has a great stigma, right, which persists and continues due to this toughness culture, which harms well-being. So I have to have this identity of being tough, having it together, being resilient, right? And the collective unit is valued more than the individual, so I am not inclined to seek for help, right? And then there's hypermasculinity and moral superiority, which impacts civilian integration. So not only am I required to be way more masculine than the average person, right? And to have a moral superiority, but I believe that I am more masculine and I am morally superior in the military. Therefore, when I am no longer in the military and I go to be a normal civilian, there's a clash of identity, right? Because now I see them as less and I see the military higher. So my value is diminished if I am not in the military. And then what are some common attitudes and practices towards spirituality and religion? And the United States military is a very diverse group which supports and encourages and embraces a diversity of faiths and religions, right? And there is non-religious spirituality, right, which includes prayer, meditation, and this has proven to aid in trauma. But what the U.S. military does is that it has a culture of a chaplain corps where Christians, Muslims, Jewish, they can all come together and find their common ground and they're able to worship what is called a multi-denomination worship style. And every military facility offers spirituality, offers chaplaincy, offers worship services, right? And it's the policy of the military accommodates all different religious practices and respects, right, these practices. There is some tension between cohesion, which is the group, and individual expression in pluralistic settings, right? So many people worshiping or having so many different faiths, and the individual practices may have or may clash from, from time to time. Now, what are some key historical events and societal perceptions? Number one is the integration of Black soldiers and women. Okay, in 1948, President Truman issued an executive order to eliminate segregation in the military, and it allowed Black or color people the opportunity to be able to join the military. And then later on, women as well, up until the 1970s, that's when women were, the doors were open more broadly for women in the military. Now, there are a few cultural scandals that have taken place in the military, and there's also a heroic portray of the military unit versus the hidden trauma and discrimination, right? We will discover in this presentation. And then number four is public trust is declining among youth, and it's tied to democratic alignment. So we're going to go over this historic events. Okay, so and the first one we mentioned is in 1948, the desegregation, Executive Order 9981 by President Truman, and it failed to eliminate systemic exclusion of Black troops from leadership, combat roles, and mentorship. So even though it eliminated segregation, there were still systemic issues, and they continue today. There are racial disparities that persist amongst Black and Hispanic members, which face disproportionate court, martial, and disciplinary actions, right? And this is from CAMREC 2017. And the gender expression is also an ongoing oppression, okay? Women face persistent barriers in accessing senior leadership roles and continue to experience widespread sexual harassment. And this is Mora et al. 2016. Now, there is also institutional microaggressions and implicit bias in performance reviews and selection processes, which exacerbate inequities. And this is Daniel 2020. And these are some of the oppressions, the ongoing historical and ongoing oppression within the U.S. military. Another one is the superficial DEI reforms, which face resistance due to entrenched culture of stoicism and hypermasculinity, right? So it's hard to welcome women or people who do not identify with the masculine, right? And this is the Department of Equal Inclusion. Now, we also have ongoing oppression, which impacts identity, okay, mental health, and institutional trust among marginalized members. Okay, and this is Mora et al. 2017. And then now there were two events that I was required to attend, okay? And the first event that I attended for a cultural immersion with the U.S. military, specifically the Navy, was the Navy Fleet Week in April 22, 2025, okay? And this was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and it was an immersive exposure to Navy ships, the technology, radar, helicopters, and live demonstrations. And I interacted with service members on their operational duties and saw the teamwork and the morale, right? The morale. And I also gained insight into the Navy's dual roles, the national defense, and the global humanitarianism. And there was an emphasis on themes such as discipline, camaraderie, and technological proficiency. Now, Navy Fleet Week, even though this one is specifically in Florida, but they happen throughout the United States, typically in the spring, and there's going to be one in New York, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, right, for anyone who may be interested. But this was the earliest one that I could attend, and it was in Florida. So my two events were in Florida. Now, cultural event number 2 was the Blessing of the Fleet. And this is a spiritual event in which coastal towns bless the departing ships, right? specifically the military. In this case, it was a strong Navy presence. And I observe ancient seafaring blessing tradition, which is rooted in faith, survival, and community. It's a procession from the cathedral basilica to the waterfront, which is marked by hymns, boat decorations, and prayers. And the event emphasized respect for maritime dangers and spiritual connection to the sea. And I witnessed the intersection of naval culture, civilian identity, and spiritual tradition. So it's pretty much a way in which the church says thank you and praise for the ongoing departing fleet, the ongoing departing ships, and the sea, the sailors, right? Now, what are the three key lessons or three key cultural lessons that I learned from these two events? And the number one was the spirit of the corps, right? Which is, it shows military cohesion, and their cohesion is deeply personal, right? It's rooted in shared sacrifice, hardship, and mutual protection. So they're very united as a group, and they take this teamwork and this this camaraderie, they take this very, very seriously, and it's very personal to them. And the second thing that I learned was spiritual syncretism, which is blessing ceremonies underscore faith, communal role in maritime and military life. Okay, so the spiritual syncretism shows the unity, the coming together of the church, the spiritual, the faith, and the military in a communal way, right? To bless the military life and the going out to the sea. And the third key lesson that I learned was the humanitarian mission of the U.S. Navy, right? And its role extends beyond combat to crisis relief, refugee aid, and global stabilization efforts. So I was not aware of their humanitarian mission as much as I am now after this event. And now I did an interview with an active Navy sailor, okay? And a little bit about him. He is a Black male veteran with extensive Navy service, and he entered with minimal prior exposure to military culture. So that's his background. Now, he experienced some cultural shock, okay, during boot camp, right? As he comes in, joins the military, has to do boot camp, and he noticed that it was marked, and he marked his initiation with a very harsh command tone, right? So there was a lot of harsh communications, verbal abuse, right? Which was normal. He was introduced to this right away in boot camp. And there was also the cultural shock of punctuality, the need to always be very punctual, and the need for concise communication and dark humor, okay, based emotional regulation. So they use dark humor to cope with the stress of the military life. There is an ethos internalization, right, which is learned that in military life, honesty is not optional, okay? It's a value institutionalized into his identity, right? So that's why it says ethos internalization, because you don't have a choice in the military when it comes to being honest, okay? It's not an option. It's a value that is that is within you. It's institutionalized, right, into your identity. And the spiritual landscape is highly pluralistic. His squadron include Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and atheists, and they all coexist with mutual respect. And this is all coming from my interview too with the young soldier. His name is Luke. Okay, and then there's the cultural navigation. Luke encountered both camaraderie, and conflict. Camaraderie means unity, brotherhood, and conflict, balancing pride in service with awareness of systemic issues. So even though there's so much brotherhood, right, in the military, there is still he was still able to witness systemic issues which include racial disparities. And what are the key cultural events and experiences? The Luke experience in the military, and specifically a Navy sailor. And he experienced symbolic traditions, right, which he described colors or the flag ceremony as very revered, yet informally dodged due to weather, highlighting military humor and pragmatism. So the soldiers, there's a flag ceremony called colors, which is very reverent, but soldiers find any and every excuse not to attend it, right? So he spoke on that. He also spoke on his foreign deployments. And in Croatia, the locals were very warm, which was very contrasting, right? And they treated him like a god. They've never seen Black people, so seeing a Black soldier from the US, they almost gave him a canonized treatment, like a little godlike treatment. And he truly enjoyed this warmth, right, from the Croatian people. There were a few painful incidents that he faced in his Navy career, and one of them was racial profiling. He was wrongfully accused of theft without evidence, and in this case, his innocence was proven since the captain knew him, but he was accused of taking the charger of a white counterpart, him being an African American sailor. Now, he also experienced what is called Black subcultural solidarity and share insight into an informal Black support network. So they created something what he called a Black Illuminary for mentorship and protection against discrimination, where Black sailors, were connected to each other, and they gave each other insights into promotions, into what to do, and pass down knowledge to each other as to prevent or to fight against the prejudice against people of color. And then he also experienced cross-cultural harmony abroad, especially affected by inclusivity in Greece and Croatia, which marked contrast to home environment. So he had a very great experience in Croatia and in Greece, right? And he was very welcome there as a Black U.S. soldier. And now three insights that I gained through military cultural immersion. Number one is the humor as emotional armor, right? Dark humor serves as a resilience mechanism within high stress and marginalized cultural groups, not just the military, and it is both a protective shield against psychological trauma and a bonding tool for communal solidarity. So when I see a person using dark humor, I can look to that and see that perhaps this person is covering trauma, and it's not just a lighthearted joke, but they're covering, right, something deeper. The second thing that I learned was symbolic rituals as identity anchors, right? Rituals such as colors, ceremonies, play dual roles. They enforce obedience and order, but also cultivate a shared identity and reinforce group cohesion, a pattern observable in religious, civic, and organizational cultures. And the third thing that I learned was informal resistance within formal systems. And despite institutional claims of equality, systemic oppression can remain embedded in institutions like the U.S. military, and its members often form invisible support systems to navigate and counter these inequities, as seen in the Black military subculture that Luke described, right? And all this help marginalized populations within the military and other groups, like this informal resistance subcultures and groups that unite to fight against inequality. And then clinical implications and practical applications. I am able to recognize that a client laughter or sarcasm may signal trauma, not levity, right? And reframe such expressions as coping strategies and respond with appropriate clinical sensitivity. So I'm able to see that and reframe that. And then acknowledge and integrate clients' cultural or spiritual practices, so prayers, rituals, community gatherings, into therapeutic frameworks. These are not peripheral, they are central to resilience and selfhood, right? So Number one, through this experience, I learned how to look at laughter and sarcasm, and I also learned the importance of integrating cultural and spiritual practices into the therapeutic frameworks. And number three is that I became attuned and aware to the hidden systemic biases that clients may experience, okay? Even within institutions claiming inclusivity, such as the military, the risk asks clients about their unofficial support systems and validate their survival strategies within structural constraints. So be aware that even though a person may be in a group that perhaps may not seem to have discrimination, but ask them specifically, have they experienced discrimination within this group, right? Not just ignore it. Those are the three things that I learned, implications and practical applications. And my references include Anwar S. William, J&L, 2024, B. Jared T. 2022, Heroism and Trauma in the U.S. Military Portrayals, Journal of Popular Culture, Tradoc T. B. 2021, Patriotism, the Price Paid by the African American Soldier, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Correlates a Racial Ethnic Harassment and Discrimination in the U.S. Military, plus more. All the references are listed. Now, thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned about the U.S. military, the Navy culture, and you enjoy the interview. Thank you very much.